Okay, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I think it's time for us to start this webinar. So welcome everyone to a Rwanda Finance Limited webinar, Conducive Centre for Capital Deployment in Africa. I wish those participating in the webinar a good and thoughtful, constructive webinar, and I hope that there'll be something for those attending, something of great interest. So if you're wondering who I am, well, I'm the Chief Legal Officer of CDC Group PLC. CDC is the UK's development finance institution. We have a long history of investing in African countries, and we continue to do so today. Now, the purpose of today's webinar is to highlight the development of the Kigali International Finance Centre in Rwanda, the efforts of the Rwandan government to create an attractive legal and tax framework for international investors, and also the role that the Kigali International Financial Centre will play as a conduit for capital financing businesses East and Southern Africa in future. I welcome questions from those of you attending, and if you look to the right of the screen, you'll see a Q&A panel in the bottom right hand corner. So if you have any questions for us, plug them in. We won't be able to answer everybody's questions, but we'll do our best. So I move now to the panelists that we have on this webinar. I'll introduce them all individually. So firstly, I'll start with the Honourable Deputy Governor, Soraya Munyana Hakuzia-Remie. Now, the Honourable Soraya is the Deputy Governor of the National Bank of Rwanda. She was previously Rwanda's Ministry of Trade and Industry. And before that, she was the Senior Vice President in the Financial Institutions Division of ING Bank, which is in London. Well, at least it has a very large office in London, not too far from where I'm sitting at the moment. So welcome, the Honourable Soraya. I then move on to Julian Kavere-Uganda. Now, Julian is the founder and a senior partner of a Rwandan law firm called K Solutions and Partners. He's currently the president of the Rwandan Bar Association, and he's also the vice chairman of the Kigali International Arbitration Centre, which I'm sure we'll hear about a little later. So welcome, Julian. Moving on to Ntudi Moyelo. Now, Ntudi is the Chief Investment Officer of Rwanda Finance Limited, the host of this webinar. So after a long career in international banking in both Europe and Africa, Ntudi now focuses on the development of the Kigali International Financial Centre, and particularly on the creation of strategic and international partnerships. So again, welcome, Ntudi. Now, finally, but due to unforeseen circumstances, not live, but by film, we have Mr. Tijan Thiam. Now, Mr. Thiam is the chair of Rwanda Finance Limited. He's a renowned international banker. He is currently the executive chairman of Freedom Acquisition Corporation, which is a special purpose acquisition company raised fairly recently. He's the former CEO of Credit Suisse and Prudential PLC. He's currently chair of the audit committee of the Kering Group. He's the special envoy for C19 in the African Union, and he's a member of the International Olympic Committee. So we're very fortunate to have a message that he was able to send us a little earlier today. So at this juncture, I'd ask the Rwanda Finance team to play Mr. Thiam's thoughtful message to us, and his opening remarks will set the scene for the rest of our discussion. So without further ado, RFL team, may we hear from Mr. Thiam?
Hello. Hello, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar about the KIFC and its prospects as a financial center It's a pleasure to welcome you in my capacity as chairman of Rwanda Finance, as well as all my colleagues on the board. It's an honor for all of us to contribute to Rwanda's efforts to develop its activities as an international recognized financial center. Let me say a few words maybe about why KIFC. Rwanda has great leadership, which is a prerequisite to any success in that field. President Kagame has built a distinguished, outstanding track record and has built around him a team which across the board displays competence and openness and determination. For example, the Ministry of Finance, the Rwanda Development Board, the Central Bank, all the key stakeholders in Rwanda are competent and mobilized, and that's a very unique strength. The second thing that we can put forward for Rwanda is its extraordinary political stability. Investors value very much visibility, stability, predictability, and therefore Rwanda's stability is an extremely attractive feature that the country and Kigali have. The third one is really the human capital, the quality of the people from Rwanda. To develop a business, you need people. People are what makes a business, and Rwanda has a very significant supply of qualified executives, women and men, who can help any investor who would come to Kigali develop its presence. That's actually very well illustrated by Nick, the CEO of Rwanda Finance, and all his team. I've met them when I was in Kigali recently, and I was just incredibly impressed by them and by their competence and their professionalism. And that is also a unique asset for investors who want to grow and invest in Eastern and Southern Africa and beyond. So I really again reiterate my belief that Kigali is an extremely attractive financial center, and that over the coming years, this is going to become more and more visible as more and more investors come. The Rwanda authorities have made a lot of effort in order to build a tax and regulatory environment that is really world-class. A lot of reforms have been enacted, and a few more are in the pipeline and are going to come to fruition soon, creating a very, very positive, very, very attractive environment. So I will not make you wait any longer before you can listen to panelists. I am sorry I cannot be with you, but in this day and age with technology, anything can be done. And I'm speaking to you here from the east coast of USA, giving you again my very warm encouragements for a very productive and fruitful conversation and discussion today. Thank you very much, and have a very good session.
And thank you, Mr. Thiam, for your words. And I believe we're now back into a live situation. So as Mr. Thiam said, anything could be done. So hopefully in the next 40 or so minutes, we will be able to cover the story of Kigali International Finance Centre and why it is becoming so important for the country. So with that, I think we'll move into our Q&A session. And I would like to address my first question to the Honourable Soraya. So, Honourable Soraya, from a central bank perspective, why is the Kigali International Financial Centre strategically so important for your country?
Thank you very much, Mark. And I want first to thank the Rwanda Finance for this invitation to discuss the conducive environment that's been created for the Kigali International Finance Center. And I think building on the words of the chairman of the Rwanda Finance, Mr. Thiam, why, one, KIFC is important for Rwanda strategically, and also what has made it possible. I think the conducive environment that the country has created over the years, I would say the last 15 years, conducive business environment, predictable market, as well as a growing economy, that really has served the purpose. And I think if I start by Rwanda's vision, where as a country, we want to be a high income country in the next, I would say, 30 years by 2050, meaning that we have to multiply by more than 10 our income per capita. That's an ambitious target, which requires accelerated public and private investment. However, the current low domestic savings level cannot guarantee such accelerated investment. It's therefore important for our country to strategically position itself to attract not only regional, but also foreign investments and patient capital to finance long-term projects. From a central bank's perspective, the development of the financial sector is crucial in multiple ways. Financial stability cannot be achieved without healthy competition in the financial sector, without a vibrant financial ecosystem, qualified human resources, talent, and access to finance for not only individuals, but also our private sector, be it large corporates or SMEs. And indeed, international finance centers have proven that they provide not only the infrastructure for investment and resources that are needed to drive entrepreneurship, economic growth across industries, but I think in particular for Rwanda, this will be an important catalyst, not only for diversifying funding sources for our companies, but also targeting the African market. And so for the National Bank of Rwanda, really KIFC will be a critical enabler for Rwanda's economic growth. And I would really mention four major ways in which I see the strategic importance of KIFC. As I mentioned, it will enhance Rwanda as a great investment destination, and KIFC provides opportunities for global financial institutions with appetite for frontier and emerging markets, not only Rwanda, but also East Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa, and ultimately the whole continent. And another key aspect that we see as a central bank will be KIFC's role in bolstering Rwanda's external balance of payment position by facilitating the flow of capital in our country, but also facilitating and mobilizing foreign direct investments, facilitating private equity funds to come into the country, as well as intermediation from development financial institutions such as CDC, as well as boost exports of services, especially to the continent. And the third area of strategic importance reliant on agriculture, but we want to really move to high value and knowledge-based economy, and financial services is a sector that will be key in that regard. Today, the financial sector contribute only 2.4% to our gross domestic product. And when we look at countries that have established international finance centers, be it Mauritius, be it Singapore, we see that the contribution of financial services is above 10. I think Singapore is now at almost 14% of financial services contribution to GDP, Mauritius close to 12%. And even if you look at developed countries like the UK, really the contribution of the financial services is at 7%. So increasing the contribution of financial services in our economy will be crucial. And last but not least, I would mention the contribution of KIFC in our integration agenda. Rwanda was among the first countries in Africa to sign to the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which has created the largest single market in the world, with 54 African countries now part of a single market. And financial services are one of the first services that will be liberalized in that, in that single market. So any bank, any investment fund or fintech company that is based and licensed in Rwanda will be able to offer its services and products across the continent with no additional tax or regulatory hurdles. Of course, the implementation of this agreement will take a few years, but I think having KIFC established in Rwanda today is a recipe for success in what we're trying to achieve as a country. I have no doubt that in 10 years from now, our financial sector as we know it today will have been fundamentally transformed by KIFC, and the National Bank of Rwanda is ready to fully support that development. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Honourable Soraya. Could I bring in Tudi here, please? One of the things that I'd like you to reflect on, and Tudi, is how do you see the centre developing in the next 5 or 10 years? Why should its development interest foreign investors, and what investment opportunities do you think it will facilitate?
Thank you very much, Mark, for the question. And again, it is a pleasure and an honor to be here in this panel today, sharing those views on the progress made on Kigali International Financial Center. I believe that before projecting ourselves to the one-year potential positioning of KFC, it is important to take a step back and look at where we came from. And this is an invitation to look at the leadership and the vision that came from Rwanda. The leadership in Rwanda make it possible today for us to have this discussion. And this came through very challenging and difficult decisions. And I would like just to name one, because I would say it gives the scene in what is financial ecosystem in Africa in general. We had Honorable Deputy Governor Soraya who just explained how the central bank is playing a key role in the development of the country. In 1995, the government of Rwanda decided to fully let its currency floating. And that was a very tough decision to take at the time. And today we are able to attract capital, to attract foreign currencies in the country, thanks to the decision at the time. So everything that you are doing from now is always coming from this background. And looking at where we want to go, first of all, we want the audience to understand that as of today, the country is already offering a competitive and attractive platform for those who are looking for a domicile in terms of fund services, in terms of holding company in Rwanda. Basically, if you are operating across the continent with the need to consolidate treasury, with the need to domicile your investment structure, you can already come to Rwanda. But where do we see the center in 1 year time? We would like the center to also speak to the needs of those who want to prepare and plan their succession. So in 1 year, we want to see new players coming in that will not talk only to institutional investors and not only to large corporates, but also to individuals. That's where we want to see the center in 1 year. In 5 years' time, we would like that improvement to go to another level. And this time we will look at innovation. We want to see more fintech finding their home in Rwanda for the activities on the continent. We want to see innovation in the field of capital markets with innovative solutions, structuring, securitization being made through Kigali. And maybe in 10 years' time, we want to see the center being recognized as the center for capital of trust in the continent. We want to be that place where people feel comfortable to transact and to invest through Africa. So really our message today is to say this is not an overnight project. We do understand that it takes time to build a center of reference, and the government has been working hard to make it happen for many, many years now. And what we are seeing today are just the premises, I will say, of this future successful center. So, and why should investors look at it? And why should they have interest to come to Rwanda? Because Rwanda is a country where there is growth. Before the pandemic, we were one of the leading countries in Africa in terms of GDP growth. We were beyond 6%. And even during COVID, we have demonstrated the resilience of our economy. So by coming into Rwanda, there is a lot of opportunities in terms of investment, but we are offering more than that, because through Rwanda, we are offering access to investment opportunities that are across Africa. I will have time to go more into the details about it, but here the message again is, if you want to have access to those investment opportunities on the continent, you don't have to multiply yourself by 52 times. You just need to come first in Rwanda and then get access to the rest of the continent. So this is where we see Kigali International Financial Center playing a key role, not only for the country, but also the rest of the continent.
Thank you very much, Judy. Thank you. Julien, I'll come to you next. There are a lot of professional advisors listening to this webinar, and they're going to be very interested in the legal and regulatory reforms in the country. So they're going to be interested in some of the detail. So could you talk a little to the laws and regulations that have been promulgated to make the KIFC in Rwanda an attractive investment destination and a conduit for investment into neighboring countries? Are there any laws, regulations that you'd like to bring to the attention of the international lawyers, fund managers, fund administrators, and bankers listening to this webinar? So Julien, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, so this kind of the willingness of the Rwanda Finance and the Kigali International Financial Center to attract investors is related to the legal framework in place, laws and regulation in place. Mainly, there is 19 existing law that has been amended, and there is 5 laws that are new in the market of Rwanda for facilitating investors. It has been categorized in kind of 4 categories: compliance, so making sure that we are fighting money laundering potential, so the country is compliant with international standard in that sector; fighting terrorism financing on that side of the compliance; and reputation of the country, that is a country that is strongly anti-money laundering, city to come in, and making sure that there is a new law that has been enacted in January for ensuring the mutual legal assistance in criminal matters. So wherever there is an issue, countries can communicate and exchange information with Rwanda on the side of financial information. This is on the side of the money laundering and compliance issues. So on the regulatory side, you need an environment that is with a political will and prudent regulators like the Central Bank of Rwanda and the Capital Market Authority. Having pro-investment regulators is key for investors. So there is laws that has been amended for the law governing the National Bank of Rwanda and the law establishing the Capital Market Authority as 2 main regulators of the financial sector in Rwanda. So there is also investment vehicle that has been established because the company law we used to have was not matching with the willingness we had for the capital market and the Kigali International Financial Center to be working efficiently. So we now have a company law that is allowing some new entities like protected cell company. We have a specific law for partnership, allowing more flexibility for private equity fund for different vehicle that we may need to have in Kigali for the legal framework to be in place and to be regulated. We have a law regulating collective investment scheme that was enacted in 2011, but now also it has been matching with what the Rwanda Finance has been recommended to Parliament and the Law Reform Commission that was needed on some provision. So for international lawyers, fund managers, and so we want to emphasize that now investment vehicles are in place for creating a trust, creating a foundation, creating a protected cell company or partnership in Rwanda, which we didn't have in previous year. So there is a number of laws that has been amended. Other laws has been enacted or currently being approved by Parliament. And all of these to make sure that there is a competitive tax regime. There is also an amendment that has been proposed by the Rwanda Finance to the Ministry of Finance and the Rwanda Revenue Authority, which is one also of the key regulators the sector may have. We, on the top of the Capital Market Authority and the Central Bank, we also consider Rwanda Revenue as a key partner of the institution, the people willing, the investors willing to come to Rwanda. But the key one, a key law I would any international lawyer to look at is the investment code that was enacted in February this year, that is giving a lot of incentive and proposing the way to register as an investor in Rwanda. It's quite quick and efficient because in a few hours you can register your company, and in few days you can have your investment certificate that will be allowing you to have some incentive. We will be discussing the way of accessing those laws. One of the advantages of the Rwandan market is that any enacted law in Rwanda is in French, English, and Kinyarwanda, which allow an easy analyze by international lawyers, fund managers, or their advisors. Even auditors can quite easily access online those information and go on the top of the bilateral international treaties that has been signed, DTAs, or other regulation or laws that are now in place in Rwanda. So we can go in details if they want more information, but for the sake of time, I can maybe stop here and answer to question if there is more to come.
Julian, before we leave you, it's clear that your lawmakers have been extraordinarily busy over the last couple of years. But I'm curious, what countries did the Rwandan government look to, I guess, for best practice, for want of a better expression, when they were thinking about drafting the laws they wanted to adopt? Could you talk to that briefly?
Yes, it's looking to international best practice because we have a new center in Rwanda, but there is other centers that has been having a long journey, and we could have the example of the London one. So you know better because we've been helping a lot on that side, and we know how the London market, how the London center is operating. It was a very good example, similar to Jersey Finance, and the Honorable Deputy Governor has been mentioning that some example we've been looking at was also Singapore and Hong Kong, but mainly London and Jersey has been a very good example for setting up international best standard, making sure that we are fighting correctly and having laws that are fighting correctly money laundering practices, fighting and the identification of terrorist financing to avoid those kind of errors that can happen for a newly established center. So we are now, the legal framework is in place. Regulators are well knowing the situation, knowing the international best practice. Willingness of the political side is operating, and practitioners like lawyers, auditors knows also the law in place. So those are the examples and international best practices we've been following and learning from. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Julian. May we move back to the Honourable Soraya? One of the questions I've got in my mind from a sort of policy and strategic perspective, where do you see the centre excelling in the long run? And what area of the financial services industry will it focus on?
Thank you, Mark. I think there's the strategy that Rwanda Finance has put forward in areas of focus, be it on the fintech, being on the green financing or impact investment. But as central bank, we also see a great opportunity in trade finance. If I start with fintech, we really expect to see enormous progress in financial technology and innovation and the provision of a broad range of financial services digitally. And Rwanda really has the basics for that digital innovation, being, internet connectivity through optic fiber, through the proper legal and regulatory framework, and the government cashless agenda. And with this project, with this progress, really Rwanda is geared to become a fintech hub. And we see fintechs play an active role in services, but also disrupting our financial sector as it is now. Secondly, on impact investment, I think one of the first members of KIFC, Chansen International, and probably Tudi would speak more about it, is an impact investor who's setting up a fund to support students' needs in terms of financing with a long-term view. And I think it's aligned really with the government's policy in heavy investment in education. And KIFC is structured to enable participation of opportunities. I mentioned earlier on the need for long-term capital, which is really, I think it's an understatement to say we have a huge financing gap, not only in Rwanda for long-term projects, but also in Africa. And KIFC presents that great opportunity to connect investors to firms, to projects that are looking for that capital. And the opportunity is even greater, I think, during this context of low interest rates in advanced markets, and looking at the returns that many projects in Rwanda, but also in the region and the continent offer. On the last part, on trade finance, there's no way our continent can develop and sustain its growth without, focusing on intra-African trade. Our continent is really lagging behind other continents in terms of the size of intra-African trade, which is, at 16%, 17%. Whereas, if you compare with Asia or Europe, which are at 65%, is really, really low. And if there's a lesson that we've learned from this pandemic is, to be able to trade with your neighboring countries, to be able to trade with the region and make sure that you can not only invest in infrastructure to connect with each other, but also be able to attract capital that look not only to projects that are specific to one country, but also the cross-border projects and also cross-border trade. So I think here there's a huge opportunity to look at cross-border payment systems, to look at all the products in trade finance to facilitate really not only investors, but really traders and the private sector across African countries in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, the Honourable Soraya. And Tudi, can I bring you in again, please? What do you see this centre offering that other financial centres that are currently serving the African market perhaps don't? What do you think your advantages are?
Thank you, Mark, for the question. And here we have first to acknowledge that we in Rwanda, we are very fortunate to have those other centers that have been, I would say, paving the way for us. Talking about Mauritius, Dubai, Jersey, Singapore, Luxembourg. Actually, the way we look at them is first as a young child. There is a proverb in Africa saying it takes a village to raise a kid. And today we are that kid. And we are learning from all of them. And it was mentioned by Julia, the laws that you have been amending have taken references from those other IFCs. So we do share the same playing field as an international financial center. We do share the same language in a way. Most of our laws have been amended using the common law, and we do have the same end objective, is to make it possible, as it was said by Honorable Soraya, to have large transactions being cross-border or direct investment into the country possible through the financial center. So that's really the introduction. But now going more into the specific of KFC. Our first main difference is the fact that we have been built internationally for Africa. What it means is, first of all, we have looked at the best international practices, especially around compliance when developing the center. It means as well, because we have Africa as our core, being the #1 destination or origin of our transaction, which makes the connectivity in the continent a key for us. So we are actively working in developing partnerships with the different countries, not only in the region, but at the level of the continent, and also with our peers from the other international financial centers. And third, because it is difficult to, I would say, to cater for the needs of those different type of players that we want, we are putting a focus on ease of operation. For us, it is very important for people in the audience, when they will decide to come to Rwanda, to find it easy, let's say, to get access to professionals like Julien, to find it easy to understand the different regulations that may come from the central bank, as an example. So what makes us different is really those three pillars that we have around compliance, connectivity, and ease of operation. Now, looking at where we are, Rwanda is part of 3 regional economic blocs in Africa. One of them is actually the largest bloc on the continent, which is COMESA. And none of the other centers can provide that access to this variety of countries, I will say. Here we are talking of a potential population above 700 or 800 million. And no one else on the continent can offer the same connectivity services. Now, at our level in KFC, we do also understand that the capital, the human capital, is key. So what makes a difference is the fact that we are able to talk the language of those that are coming from Francophone countries, from Anglophone countries, and really as a reference language, like we do. So we really look at all angles, from the policy side, the ecosystem, and also the capital part of the equation. So that would be, in a nutshell, my answer to you.
Julie, thank you. I'm going to bring Julian in at this point. Look, you've got to forgive the question. I'm a lawyer and I like asking lawyers questions about lawyers. How about that? So what I'm interested in is how are Rwandan law firms developing their know-how given the sheer volume of new legislation and regulations? And how do, if there are international lawyers on this call, how do they and potential market participants access the new legislation and the regulations? Where are they? So Julian, over to you to answer that one.
Yeah, I will begin by the last question. So its laws and regulations are available online and in 3 languages. So Kinyarwanda, English, and French for each and every law and regulation being enacted. Wherever, when it is enacted by a regulator, like the central bank, you find it on the central bank website. There is a central website for the Ministry of Justice, where all official gazettes are available, again, in all 3 official languages of the Rwanda Republic. When it is a company law, you will find it on the RDB and the Rwanda Development Board website. You can also use the Law Reform Commission website that is also making a list by domain of each and every country or each and every law that has been enacted. So that is the availability. It's available online. You just can use Google or another browser for accessing the law you want. For 2011, like the investment code, if you put investment code Rwanda 2021, you will get directly the law available in Google. So it makes it easier, and you can access the specific article provision and so. On the Rwanda Bar Association also, you can find some law that has been enacted. So you can use Ministry of Justice, Rwanda Development Board, Law Reform Commission, Ministry of Justice, Empowerment, of course. So it's easy and accessible. For lawyers, we have, as Bar Association, for training, and so we have a duty of continuing legal education that is being done for now online. Because of the COVID, usually we have it physical meetings, and we have 2 or 3 every month when we discuss laws that has been enacted and even draft laws to have comment of lawyers. So Rwanda Finance has been also selecting some, requesting the Bar Association to designate some lawyers to be participating in the drafting of those laws. So as Rwanda Bar Association, we do our best to be able to communicate to members of what is being done and the new laws that are coming and the difference. And also it is being published in newspaper, like New Times. When there is a new law, we can communicate on that. So that is one of the solutions we have for developing the know-how. And internally, as law firms, there is different corporate law firms in Rwanda. We are also developing our teams on the incoming changes and amendments to be ready for clients that are coming on what is available for them, what is the changes, and how it can impact positively investors that are coming to Rwanda.
Julian, I'm not going to let you go just yet. I've got one final question for you, very, very briefly. I know there's some folks on this call that are very interested in the International Arbitration Center, the center that you're the vice chair of. Just in 30 seconds, can you tell us how progress is going on with the International Arbitration Center?
Yes, so for dispute resolution. When you invest, you want also to be protected. You need to know what is the framework in place and institution in place in case there is a dispute. Kigali International Arbitration Center is one of those solutions, and it has been, as we have been saying, established in 2012 for now more than 9 years, on the basic of comparative of the LCIA London and ICC. So everything that is being done in London or Paris has been a benchmark for what is being done in Kigali. And every arbitrator that is registered in UK or Paris or any other international arbitration center can be admitted to be an arbitrator in a case in Rwanda. So the fees has been minimized to attract investors. Visa on request when there is an arbitration case happening in Rwanda are facilitated. there is online arbitration possible to be done in that facility. So when parties select arbitrators from UK, from Dubai, from Singapore, that are having a seat in Kigali, in Rwanda, Kigali International Arbitration Center is facilitating that one. And the Kigali, the KIAC, as we call it, Kigali International Arbitration Center rules, are copy-paste of what is in practice, international best practice of what is being done in arbitration in Rwanda. And the seat of the African Arbitration Association is being now with the Kigali International Arbitration Center in Kigali. So the reputation is very good. And so far, there has been no case set aside in the commercial court in Rwanda, and court are pro-arbitration now. So wherever you have a provision saying that there is a clause for arbitration in your contract, you will be, the case will not be judged by the court. No more court, you have to go to arbitration. And if you have selected Kigali International Arbitration Center, that will be your choice and your arbitrators, as it is being done in London with the LCIA or ICC in Paris. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. That's very, very helpful. I'm now going to broaden, although Julian and I could speak for hours on this, being fellow lawyers, I'm going to broaden the conversation a little bit, and I'm going to go back to the Honourable Soraya. What I'm interested in is what can we expect from the National Bank of Rwanda as it supports the members of the KIFC and as it seeks to attract international financial institutions to Rwanda? So what's your role? Well, you know, your personal role, of course, but at the institution's role, National Bank of Rwanda.
Thank you, Mark. I think today central banks really have a huge task of not only maintaining robust prudential frameworks while ensuring that they're not stifling innovation. You know, the National Bank of Rwanda, as the regulatory body of financial services, is prepared to continue establishing sound regulatory practices and ensuring compliance to provide confidence to all KIFC members that Rwanda has adequate regulation and supervision of financial products and services. I think for investors, really, trust and predictability are fundamental to be able to make their investment decision and come to KIFC. I could cite the legal reforms, and Julien has, you know, extensively touched upon the different laws that have been adopted, enacted in the past 2 years, and really that enhanced confidence in our market. And if we look at, you know, AML and CFT laws, you know, anti-money laundering and combating financing of terrorism, we have established the Financial Intelligence Center. We have reviewed, and the Parliament is in the process of adopting the reviewed payment systems law, microfinance law, and those are, you know, laws that we as a central bank, we actively pursued and made sure that they comply with international standards. We also contributed to other laws that were important before the establishment of KIFC, you know, being the insolvency law, the collective investment scheme law, and we will review our banking law this year as well. And here I want to stress on the importance of consultations during this regulatory review process, where not only government institutions, regulators are consulted, but we also bring in the private sector, professionals and market players. In this case, you know, financial institutions, the Bar Association, the Rwanda Bankers Associations are called upon to bring their contribution to these laws being reviewed. And secondly, I think what participants of KIFC can expect is, you know, to be part of you know, that, you know, sort of an enabler to innovation in our financial sector. The National Bank of Rwanda is in the process of establishing the first ever regulatory sandbox regulation in the country, which will allow innovators to test their products in a live environment, live but controlled environment, you know, to be able to test their products before they are on the market. And also this year, the National Bank of Rwanda established a dedicated department within the central bank to handle financial innovation and manage the regulatory sandbox. You know, we are also part of you know, the working group working on fintech policy and strategy. And I think third and most importantly is what are we doing as not only a central bank, but I think as a country as a whole to make sure that we have the human resources and the competence that is needed for KIFC. Any international finance center is as successful as the talent it can offer to participants. And, you know, we are actively involved in the capacity building of financial sector, you know, professionals. And even before KIFC, you know, the National Bank of Rwanda was partnering with the Rwanda Backers Associations, the Association of Insurance Companies to develop professional banking and insurance certification programs. And we will work now with Rwanda Finance to establish a financial sector skills council, which will lead financial skills enhancement programs. But I think it would also be important to mention that as we look at the competence that is needed in our financial sector, we cannot omit the competence that's needed within the central bank. And since 2017, we really have put in place a strategy to transform the National Bank of Rwanda into a world-class central bank, you know, partnering with world-class central banks in Europe and Asia and benchmarking ourselves on central banks in those economies, be it, you know, in Europe, the Bank of England, for instance, Sveriges Riksbank in Sweden, the Central Bank of Sweden, the ECB, but also looking at Asia, you know, what Singapore, the Monetary Authority of Singapore is doing, and so forth. And this has allowed us to also look for, you know, new talents within the central bank, but also build the capacity of central bankers so that they can, you know, be equipped to not only put in place regulations that are needed for a sound financial sector, but also, I think, you know, gain skills and be exposed to the new products that are coming into the country, into the market, and be sort of ahead of the curve. Without a strong central bank that can, you know, be at the helm of the stability of the financial sector, I believe KIFC would not be as successful. And lastly, I think, you know, the macroeconomic stability. This is, you know, as central bank, we have as a mandate price stability. So in our monetary policy, we're making sure that one, investors have certainty on their returns on investment, that they are sure that it will not be eroded by high inflation or high currency depreciation. And this is something that the central bank will continue to implement so that we can sustain a stable macroeconomic environment. So we believe these are the things that people can expect from the central bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Soraya. Look, we are running close to time. We might have a few minutes afterwards, and I'm very conscious that I did promise you the opportunity to ask your own questions. So again, I repeat, bottom of the screen on the right, if you have a question you've been dying to ask us, please ask us. We might not be able to answer it at great length, but we'll do our damnedest to answer it. So I'm going to move across to Ntuli for the final question, which is, look, you're building something. No, you have built something and you're continuing to build something. What sort of professional services firms do you see developing a deeper presence in Kigali? And how should anybody that's interested in coming to the party, how do they get the invitation? Who do they talk to? Who do they contact? Ntuli, you've got a minute to cover that.
Wow, what a challenge, but thank you. I take it. So first of all, in terms of professional companies coming into Rwanda, we believe that the best answer to it will be to give the profile of those that have already chosen Rwanda and Kigali International Financial Center as their new home. And this for us is the best proof of our readiness. And the first type we will say are those that are offering corporate management services. For those who are familiar with Mauritius, Luxembourg, or Jersey, they are either called management companies or corporate service providers. So those are the types of professionals that we see coming into Rwanda, because they are the first entry point for anyone who wants to domicile or start a business in our jurisdiction. The second type of professional that we see coming in are mainly around investment. So, of course, you have financial advisors of all kinds that are coming in Rwanda and looking at being regulated either by the central bank or regulated by our capital market authority. And they are coming from East Africa, West Africa, and even Europe and Asia. The third group, I would say, Mark, and sorry if we keep on repeating the same, being Honorable Soraya, Julia, myself, it's around education. We see professional firms coming for training into the professional space. Here we could, I could give a name of one coming from Mauritius, for instance. The key here is to make sure that we are at the international level. We do provide certification so that when people are coming into Rwanda, there is, I would say, a minimum quality on the services that they will be provided to them. Now, if someone wants to come to Rwanda, how to go about it? I think that the easiest way to do it is to come to Rwanda Finance. You know, our main role is to engage with new potential members. We have also a mandate to facilitate the connection and the link with the different stakeholders that we have in Rwanda, being the central bank, Rwanda Development Board, or any other key institution in the country. And we have, of course, the role to promote. And this is something I would say quite unique in Rwanda Finance. When someone wants to come here, he will find through us an easy way to voice out the services that he wants to provide. He will find an easy way to get access to potential partners because we have this role of connecting the stakeholders in Rwanda, but also with our partners beyond the country. So in a nutshell, that will be my answer. And again, all of this, of course, is available on our website, the Rwanda Finance website that anyone can find on the internet.
Okay, so I made the promise that we'd answer some questions, and if everybody can give me a couple more minutes, please. I have a great question for you, but before I ask the question, and I'll probably ask this to the Honourable Soraya, if you can scribble down an email address, info@rfl.rw, that's info@rfl.rw. If we can't answer your questions now, please email that address, and I'm sure that the team will do their damnedest to answer. So the question I have, it's a great question actually. We've focused very much on Rwanda, but we haven't really focused on the impact of a successful centre for Burundi, for the DRC, for neighbouring countries. And so what the question is that how will neighbouring countries benefit from the success of a fully functioning, fully working, operational KIFC? So perhaps I can give that one to the Honourable Soraya to think about.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I think it's a great question from the participant. I think, as we indicated, KIFC, of course, is one geared towards positioning Rwanda as a financial hub. And, you know, I think as a central bank, we would not be, we have to be selfish and see what it will bring to our local financial sector. However, all the capital we are attracting today is also capital that will be invested, you know, cross-border. So neighboring countries, being countries that are in the East African community, but also, let's say the common market of Eastern and Southern Africa. These are common markets that are already established and operational, and at later stage, the AFCFTA is the large or small that's in our region can tap into the capital that will be attractive to KIFC. If there's an asset manager, an investment fund looking to invest in projects, let's say in energy projects or in agriculture projects or in mining, they can raise funds through the members of KIFC. So I think the benefits are unlimited, but it's really our role, and I think the role of Rwanda Finance, to really sort of reach out to neighboring countries and make sure that everyone is aware of the opportunities and the members of KIFC that are ready to invest in those markets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to say a huge thank you to the Honourable Soraya, to Julien, to Ntudi, and obviously to Mr. Tiam that can't be with us today, but we hugely appreciated his message of support earlier. Finally, the team at RFL that pulled this together, you've done a superb job, so thank you. And thank you to those of you who've attended. And I've been looking at the participant numbers, and many of you have stayed on, which is really a thank you for staying on and listening to us. So as I said, any more questions, you know the email address to send it to you. I wish you all the very best. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Pleasure.
And I think that with that, we'll bring the meeting to a close.